The late summer heat clung to the city like a second skin, soaking into the concrete and humming off the glass walls of the financial district. Cheng sat in his car with the engine off, watching the sun dip low between buildings. The radio played a slow ballad he wasn't listening to. His fingers tapped against the steering wheel, restless, uncertain, almost twitching with thoughts he couldn't quiet. He wasn't supposed to be here. Not parked outside Wu Suowei's apartment complex like some ridiculous rom-com character, hoping to catch a glimpse of the man he'd been trying very hard to avoid. Yet here he was, still gripping the remnants of a conversation he shouldn't have started. It had happened 3 nights ago. The sky had been gray and slouching with rain, and they'd both taken shelter under the same crooked awning outside a noodle shop, their shoulders brushing, laughter hiding 1,000 things neither of them dared to say out loud. Cheng had been tired, bone-deep tired, not from training or the office, but from the constant weight of pretending everything was fine. So when Wu Suowei had jokingly said, "Don't tell me the great Cheng gets lonely too," something in him cracked. "I do," he'd answered. Quietly. Too honestly. "And I hate it." He'd meant to brush it off, to smirk and say he was joking. But Wu Suowei's face had shifted, barely but enough, and Cheng couldn't bring himself to lie. Now he regretted it. Not because Wu Suowei had mocked him, he hadn't, but because something in the air between them had changed. And Cheng wasn't sure if he wanted to face what that meant. Wu Suowei had always been difficult to read. Playful, sharp-tongued, and maddeningly self-assured. He wore sarcasm like a tailored suit and rarely let his own guard down. But he'd listened that night, really listened. That alone made Cheng nervous. Vulnerability had never ended well for him. Still, the silence after that night had grown louder. He'd dodged calls, ignored texts, even skipped their usual Thursday sparring session. He hated himself for it, but he couldn't stop. Just then, the apartment doors slid open, and Wu Suowei stepped out, phone in one hand, his other tucked into the pocket of a casual hoodie. He looked relaxed, unaware, maybe even tired. But he didn't glance around, didn't look for anyone. Certainly not Cheng. That irrational part of Cheng, the part he spent years disciplining into silence, surged up. He missed him. Not just the banter or the routine, but the strange comfort of Wu Suowei's presence, how he never demanded more than Cheng could give, yet always managed to draw it out anyway. He rolled down the window halfway, feeling ridiculous. Either he drove away now or stepped out and said something. Pretending nothing happened wasn't an option anymore. Wu Suowei stopped at the curb, waiting for a ride or maybe a friend. He scrolled through his phone, oblivious to the storm of thoughts unraveling across the street. Cheng opened his door. His footsteps were slow but deliberate, crossing the pavement like a soldier walking into battle. Wu Suowei looked up when he heard the door shut, and their eyes met across the space. Surprise flickered in his gaze, then something unreadable. Cheng stopped just short of him. For a second, neither of them spoke. "I've been avoiding you," Cheng said, hating how stiff his voice sounded. Wu Suowei tilted his head slightly, unreadable. "I noticed. I wasn't sure what to say after that night."
"Why?"
"Because you said something real?" Wu Suowei's voice wasn't harsh, but it wasn't soft either. He didn't look away. Cheng nodded slowly. "I don't say things like that. Not to anyone." "I know," Wu Suowei replied, stepping back just enough to create a space between them. Not rejection, just distance.
"But I didn't ask you to say it."
"You chose to." Cheng flinched at the truth of it. "And then you disappeared," Wu Suowei added, more quietly this time. "Like it was my fault for hearing you." That landed harder than it should have. Cheng opened his mouth to speak, then closed it. Finally, he said, "I was scared." Wu Suowei's brow rose faintly, more in curiosity than disbelief. "Of what?" "Me. Of you seeing something in me that I try to hide," he admitted, voice low. "Of losing control." For a long moment, Wu Suowei didn't respond. The sound of a distant horn broke the silence, and the evening breeze picked up, rustling the hem of his hoodie. Then, with unexpected gentleness, Wu Suowei said, You're not weak for feeling things, Cheng. You're just human. Cheng stared at him, unsure how to carry that truth. Wu Suowei offered a faint smile, tired, but sincere. Don't run from me. If you're going to show up, then show up. It wasn't an invitation. It was a challenge. Cheng took a breath, deep and grounding. Then he nodded just once. The silence between them didn't break. It shifted into something quieter, more patient. Less like an ending and more like the beginning of a fragile, necessary truce. The late summer hadn't expected him to show like a second skin, so soon. Soaking
Certainly
into the
not
concrete
early the next
and
morning.
humming off the glass
Standing
walls
outside
of
his
the
apartment
with
with
2 cups of coffee
Cheng sat in
and
his
a
car with
nervous
the engine
energy
off,
that didn't suit
watching
someone
the
as
sun dip
composed
low
as
between
Cheng's.
buildings.
He
The
opened the
radio
door
played
in
a
a
slow
loose
ballad
shirt and
he wasn't
sweatpants,
listening to.
blinking away
His fingers
sleep,
tapped against the
unsure if the
steering
fog in
wheel,
his chest was
restless,
confusion
or
or
something
something dangerously
almost
close
twitching
to
with
hope.
thoughts he couldn't
Cheng
quiet.
handed him one of the cups
He wasn't supposed
without
to
a
be
word.
here.
His
Not
eyes,
parked outside
always
Wu
sharp
Suowei's
and
apartment
deliberate,
complex,
avoided
some
Wu
ridiculous
Suowei's
rom-com
face like he was
character,
afraid
hoping
of
to
what he'd
catch a
find
glimpse
there.
of the man
They didn't
he'd been
speak
trying
as Wu
very
Suowei
hard to
stepped
avoid.
aside to let him
Yet
in.
here he
The
was,
apartment smelled
still
faintly
gripping
of
the
toasted
remnants
bread
of a
and
conversation
laundry detergent.
he shouldn't have started.
The silence between
it had
them,
happened
no
3 nights
longer
ago.
heavy with avoidance.
The sky had been gray
carried something
and
else
slouching
now,
with rain,
a tentative
and they'd both
understanding,
taken shelter
still
under the
brittle
same
at the
crooked
edges.
awning outside a
Wu
noodle
Suowei
shop.
curled
Their
his fingers
shoulders
around the
rushing,
warmth of the
laughter
cup
hiding
and
a
sank
thousand
into
things
the
neither of
couch.
them dared to say out
Cheng
loud.
stood by the window for a
Cheng
moment
had been
before
tired,
sitting across from him,
bone deep
postured
tired,
too upright for
not
someone
from training
trying
or
to
the
appear
office,
casual,
but from the
he looked like a
constant weight
man
of
ready to
pretending
confess
everything was fine
and already regretting
so
it.
when Wu
You
Suowei
didn't
had
have to
jokingly
come.
said,
Wu
"Don't
Suowei
tell me the
said,
great Cheng
finally
gets
breaking the
lonely
quiet.
too."
I
Something
know.
in him cracked.
Cheng replied.
"I do," he'd answered.
He rubbed a hand over the back of his neck,
too
then
honestly,
added,
and
but
I
didn't
it.
want to pretend it didn't happen.
He'd meant to brush it off.
Wu
to
Suowei
smirk
studied
and
him.
say he was
You
joking.
mean the part where you
But
said
Wu
you hate
Suowei's
feeling
face
weak?
had shifted,
Or the part
barely,
where you
but
ran the
enough,
moment
and
someone saw
Cheng
you
couldn't bring
differently?
himself to lie.
Cheng's
Now
jaw
he
tensed,
regretted it,
but
not
he didn't
because Wu
retaliate.
Suowei had mocked
Instead,
him.
he
He
exhaled
but
and
because
said,
something in the
"Both."
air between them had changed.
It wasn't an apology,
and
not
Cheng
exactly.
wasn't sure if
but
he
Wu
wanted to
Suowei
face
didn't
what that
need it to
meant.
be.
Wu
He sipped his
Suowei
coffee
had
and
always
leaned
been
back,
difficult to read.
watching the way
Playful,
Cheng sat like
sharp-tongued,
every inch of him was
and
waiting
maddeningly
to be judged.
self-assured. That was
He
new.
wore sarcasm
the
like a
Cheng
tailored
he
suit
knew,
and
confident,
rarely
let his own
sarcastic,
guard down.
sometimes
but he'd listened
irritatingly
that
smug,
night, really
had
listened.
always carried
that
himself
alone
like
made
nothing
Cheng
could
nervous.
touch him.
Vulnerability
But now,
had never ended
vulnerability
well for
clung
him.
to him
Still,
like a second skin.
The silence
I didn't
after
think
that
you
night
cared
had
what I
grown
thought.
louder.
Wu
He
Suowei
dodged
murmured,
calls,
ignored
I didn't think I
texts,
did either.
even skipped
Cheng
their
admitted.
usual Thursday
But I
sparring
do.
session. He
There it was
hated
again,
himself for it.
that bare
but
honesty
he
that
couldn't
Cheng
stop.
only seemed
Just
capable
then,
of
the
delivering
apartment
when he
doors
was
slid
already
open,
halfway
and
to
Wu Suowei
unraveling.
stepped out.
Wu
Phone
Suowei
in one
wasn't
hand,
sure what scared
his other
him more.
tucked into the pocket
Hearing
of
it,
a casual
or
hoodie.
knowing that it
He
stirred
looked
something in
relaxed,
him
unaware,
he hadn't prepared
maybe
for.
even tired.
So what
But
now?
he didn't glance around.
Wu Suowei asked,
didn't look for
tone
anyone.
steady.
Certainly
You say
not
something real,
Cheng.
disappear
That
for 3
irrational
days,
part of
and
Cheng,
come back hoping I've just
the
been
part he
waiting
spent
around for
years
round 2?
disciplining into
No.
silence. Surged
Cheng
up.
said,
He missed
firm
him.
this time.
Not
I
just
didn't
the
come to make
banter or the
excuses.
routine,
I
but
came
the strange
because
comfort
I don't
of
want to
Wu
run
Suowei's
anymore.
presence.
The words
How he
settled
never
between
demanded
them,
more than
deliberate
Cheng
and
could give,
raw, yet
Wu
always
Suowei's
managed to
lips
draw it out
curved
anyway.
into something wry.
He rolled down the
Not
window
quite a smile.
halfway, feeling
That's
ridiculous.
noble.
But
Either he
I'm
drove
not a
away
therapist,
now or stepped
Cheng.
out and said something.
I'm not here to walk
Pretending
you through your
nothing
emotional
happened
rehab.
wasn't an option anymore.
I'm not asking
Wu
you
Suowei
to.
stopped at the
Cheng
curb,
replied,
waiting for a
I'm
ride
just
or
asking you not
maybe
to
a
close
friend.
the door before
He
I
scrolled
figure out how
through
to
his
walk
phone.
through it.
Oblivious
Wu
to the
Suowei
storm
stared
of
at
thoughts
him.
unraveling
The sunlight
across
coming
the
through the
street.
window lit one
Cheng
side
opened
of
his door.
Cheng's face.
His footsteps
catching
were
in his
slow
lashes
but deliberate,
and outlining the
crossing
tension
the
in his
pavement
jaw.
like a soldier
For the first
walking
time
into
since
battle.
they'd met,
Wu
Suowei
Suowei
looked
saw
up
not
when he
just
heard
the
man
door
trained
shut,
to fight,
and their eyes
win,
met across the
to
space.
survive.
But
Someone
surprise
who was
still
flickered in his
learning how to
gaze.
be known.
Then something
I don't want your rehearsed
unreadable.
version.
Wu
Cheng
Suowei
stopped
said after
just
a
short of
pause.
him.
If
For a
this is
second,
going anywhere,
neither of them
friendship,
spoke.
something else.
I've been
I need you to
avoiding
stop
you.
guarding
Cheng
every
said,
word like it's
hating
a
how
war
stiff his
strategy.
voice sounded.
Cheng
Wu
gave a
Suowei
small,
tilted his
rueful
head
smile.
slightly.
I've never done this before.
I noticed.
That's
I wasn't
obvious.
sure what to say after
Wu
that
Suowei
night.
didn't mean it to
Why?
hurt, but
Because
it landed
you
with
said
enough
something
sting to
real?
make Cheng look
Wu
down.
Suowei's
Then
voice
again,
wasn't harsh.
maybe that was
but
what
it
he
wasn't wasn't soft either.
A push.
He didn't
Wu
look away.
Suowei wasn't about to
Cheng
soften
nodded
what
slowly.
needed to be said.
I don't say
You
things like
spend
that.
so much time
not to
pretending
anyone.
to be in control.
I know.
Wu Suowei continued.
Wu Suowei replied.
That you forget not
Stepping back
everything
just
worth
enough
having
to
can
create
be
a space
calculated
between
or
them.
cornered.
Not rejection.
There was no
just
immediate
distance.
reply.
But I didn't ask
just
you to
nodded
say it.
slowly.
You chose
as if
to.
letting the words sink into
Cheng
places
flinched
he
at the
rarely
truth of it.
allowed to be touched.
And then you disappeared,
Okay,
he said
Wu
quietly.
Suowei added,
That one
more
word,
quietly this time,
simple, unembellished,
like it was my
felt
fault
like
for
a
hearing
door
you.
opening.
That landed
Wu
harder
Suowei
than it
stood
should have,
and moved toward the
Cheng
kitchen,
opened his mouth,
setting
to
his
speak,
empty cup
then
in the
closed
sink.
it.
I'm going to get
Finally,
ready
he
for
said,
work.
I
You
was
staying?
scared. Wu
Cheng's
Suowei's brow
brow
rose faintly.
Do you want me to?
More in curiosity
Wu Suowei didn't
than
answer
disbelief.
right away.
Of what?
He turned back, meeting
Of you seeing
Cheng's
something
gaze.
in me that I try to
If I
hide.
didn't, I
He
would have
admitted,
never
voice
opened the
low.
door.
Of losing
Cheng's
control.
shoulders relaxed.
For a long
Just
moment,
slightly,
Wu Suowei
and for the
didn't
first time in
respond.
days.
The sound of a
breath
distant
he hadn't
horn broke the
realized he
silence,
was holding slipped
and
free.
the evening breeze
Wu
picked
Suowei
up,
disappeared
rustling
into the
the hem
hallway,
of his hoodie,
leaving him alone
then,
in the living room.
with unexpected
But it
gentleness,
didn't feel like
Wu Suowei
abandonment.
said,
It
You're
felt
not
like
weak
a
for
small
feeling
invitation.
things,
The kind of invitation
You're just human.
you only give to
Cheng
someone you're
stared
starting
at
to
him,
trust.
unsure how to
And
carry that
Cheng,
truth.
for once, stayed.
Wu Suowei offered a faint smile, tired but sincere.
Don't run from me. If you're going to show up, then show up. It wasn't an invitation. It was a challenge. Cheng took a breath, deep and grounding. Then he nodded just once. The silence between them didn't break. It shifted into something quieter, more patient. Less like an ending and more like the beginning of a fragile, necessary truce. The
Wu
late
Suowei
Suowei hadn't
clung
expected
to
him to
city
show
like
up
his
again
life
so
had been
soon.
built around
Soaking
precision.
certainly not
Concrete
early
reps
the next
counted,
morning.
coming off the
Meetings
glass
standing
walls
outside
of
his
the
apartment
financial
with
district
2
with
cups
the
of coffee.
efficiency
Cheng
of
sat in
a
his
soldier,
car with
and
the
nervous
energy
energy
that didn't suit
watching the
as
sun
undimmed
no
set
pattern
pattern buildings.
No reliable
The radio
door
played a
calling
slow
to.
ballad
And
every
every
moment
moment
was
was
unpredictable.
unpredictable.
His fingers
An
tapped against his
invitation
draft
dragged
wheels,
wheels,
his chest was
restless,
and it was driving
horse
something
slowly
dangerously
almost
close
twitching
to
with
home. They had fallen
He
into a
couldn't
rhythm
quiet
handed him one of that
he
morning
wasn't supposed
without a
to
word.
tentative, but
His knock
concise.
parked outside
Morning
Wu
coffee
Suowei's
and
apartment
deliberate
complex.
short
Like
conversation.
Wu
Wu
Suowei's
the occasional
occasional
silence
silence
that
that
stretched
hoping to
to
catch a
catch a
glimpse of
but
the
never
man. They didn't
snapped.
speak
He'd been trying
as
very
Cheng
hard
found
to
himself
avoid.
lingering more
Yet
often.
here he
The
was,
apartment
waiting
smelled
for
faint
something
ripping the
of
rusted
unspoken
bread and
conversation.
laundry detergent.
But
Wu
Wu
Suowei never
silence
made it
between
with
them.
him. happened.
He
No
no
longer
longer
heavy with avoidance.
never
The sky had
pressed,
been
and
gray,
never
something
offered
else more
more
than
than
rain.
attentive
And they'd both
understanding.
taken shelter
Still
until
brittle,
he noticed
crooked,
everything
yawning outside a
Wu
new
Suowei
Cheng
curled
with
his
shoulders
fingers
around
around
the warmth of
and
that
then put it back
and
and
thousands
without
of
him
his
neither of
house.
them dared to
The
say
Chechen
out loud.
stood by the
window for a
Chechen
moment
had been
before
tired.
sitting across from
The
him.
habit of
Bone-deep
standing
posture
just
too upright,
close
not
enough
from
to
training or
but
the art
never
casual,
quite
but
crossing
from
that
he looked like a
line.
man ready to
Wu Suowei
think
didn't
everything
mention
was
it
and
aloud.
already regretted
So
it.
when
Wu
all there,
Suowei
he didn't have to
joked
come
toward
behind
said,
sharp
Wu Suowei
eyes,
said,
knowing
knowing
silence
finally
gets
breaking the
lonely
one
too.
evening,
I
something
know.
in him
Dusk
cracked.
painted
Cheng
the
replied,
sky in dull
he
streaks
rubbed a
of mauve
hand
and
over the
white.
back of his neck.
They sat on his
added,
balcony of
and
Wu
I didn't
Suowei's
want to
apartment.
pretend it didn't happen.
He'd meant to
below
brush
them.
it off.
Wu
The city
Suowei
smirked
studied
with
and
light.
say he was
You mean
joking.
the
The part where
weaving
you
but
said
Wu
you
Suowei's
hate
face
feelings
voices
had shifted,
spilling
or the
out of
part where
barely
you
but
ran
enough
the moment
laughter
someone
saw
you
you
couldn't
differently.
bring himself
Somewhere
to
out
lie.
of view.
Cheng's
Now,
jaw
Cheng
leaned
leaned
against the railing.
not
He didn't
because
retaliate.
Wu Suowei
had
mocked
mocked
his
his gaze
He
unfocused,
exhaled
but
and
because
said,
something in the air
sat
between
behind
them
him on
it
the
wasn't
low
an
wooden
apology,
bench.
not
Cheng
exactly wasn't sure
but
if he wanted to
Wu
face
Suowei
with someone unbothered
Wu
by
Suowei
his
had
coffee
always
and leaned
been
back.
difficult to read.
Think
Watching
about
the
what
way
you
he
be doing
playful,
things
sat
were different.
sharp-tongued,
Every inch of him was
and
mad
not
and
indeed
self-assured.
voice
That was
quiet.
new.
Wore sarcasm.
Wu Suowei
Cheng
told
he
his
knew,
and
different
rarely
kind.
let his
He didn't
own
grow
guard
up
down.
the way you did,
But he'd listen
he
that
didn't
night.
have to be
Really
so
always
careful
that
all the time.
alone made
Nothing
Cheng
nerve
small
touch him.
smirk play.
Vulnerability
Now
Suowei's
had
never
never
ended
vulnerability
well for
just a
him.
man who
Still,
measures his
second
emotions
skin.
like
The silence
I didn't
after
think
that
you
night
cared
had
what I
grown
thought.
louder.
Cheng chuckled.
Wu Suowei
Suowei
murmured,
I didn't think I did either.
Wu Suowei
Skipped
turned
usual
forward,
Thursday
but
songs
I do.
on his knees.
There
I
was
didn't
again
think I'd be a
that bare
musician.
honesty
He
that
couldn't
piano
stop.
only
Maybe
seemed
just
capable
then
of
the
delivering
apartment door
completely
slid
open,
impractical
and
to
Wu
unravel.
Suowei
But I learned
stepped out.
early.
Wu Suowei
Phone
wasn't
hand
sure what
comes
scared
first.
him
Other
more.
tucked into
Emotions
the
don't
pocket,
pay
or
casual
knowing that it
Cheng
stirred
glanced
something
along
in
his
him
shoulder.
he
He
hadn't prepared
maybe
for.
even tired.
So
Not
what he didn't
anymore.
glance around.
Wu Suowei
He didn't look for
asked,
too many
steady.
fingers broken.
Certainly
Say
over the
something
years.
real.
Cheng.
Metaphor
That irrational
part
sometimes
and come back
literally.
hoping I've just
The
been
part he
waiting
spent
around
silence
silence crept in
disciplining
again.
into
No,
silence.
not
Cold,
cold.
but
Said
thoughtful.
he missed
Firm
him.
this time.
Chi-Ching
Not
tried
just
to
the banter or the
excuses,
routine.
leaning back
against the
because
railing.
I don't want to run
Wu
anymore.
Suowei's pressing behind him.
The words
How he
settled.
never
I used to want to be a
demanded more
firefighter
and
and
raw.
Wu
Yet
Suowei
Suowei's
managed to
curved
into
something
really?
wry.
He rolled down
Yeah,
the
not
window.
quite a smile.
Chi-Ching said,
Feeling
"That's
ridiculous."
almost sheepishly.
But
Either he
I'm
drove
not
away
aware
or
now,
now,
or
stepped
Chi-Ching
out,
and
thought
said
it'd
something
be good
here
to
walk
pretending
through your
nothing
emotional
happened
waves.
wasn't an option anymore.
I'm
Wu
not
Suowei
asking
asked.
you to.
Wu Suowei
One
stopped
eyebrow
the Chi-Ching
curve.
replied,
Waiting for a
"Chi-Ching, I'm just
ride or
asking you not
maybe
to
a
close
friend.
the
Now
door
I just
before
try
I
not to
scroll
get
through his
walk
phone."
through it.
Wu
Suowei's
Suowei
storm of
down.
thoughts
A
unraveling.
sunlight coming through the
Unreadable.
window lit one
Chi-Ching
side of
dangerous?
his door.
Chi-Ching's face.
His footsteps
Chi-Ching
were
hesitated
slow
but
but
deliberate,
deliberate,
outlining the
crossing
tension
not
in his
physically.
jaw like a
For
soldier
the first
walking
time
into
since
battle.
they'd met, Wu
Suowei
Suowei
saw
saw
not
he
just
heard
the
the
man
door
trained to
Wu
fight, and
Suowei
their
stood
eyes
and
met
walked
across
over
to survive.
his face
But
between
surprise
his
was still
flickered in
learning
his
how to
gaze.
be known.
Then
He didn't
I don't
touch
want your
Chi-Ching's
rehearsed
version.
version. Didn't read.
Chi-Ching
Suowei
stopped
said
at
after
his
short of
presence.
him. solid and quiet.
Anywhere.
Neither of them
Felt
like
something
grounding
else.
wire.
I've been
I need you to
avoiding
stop
you. I don't
guarding
see that.
every
She
word
said,
like it's
hating
I
haven't
haven't
been
been
watching
watching
you
you
struggle
struggle
with
with
Cheng
Wu
gave
Suowei
small,
tilted his head
rueful
slightly.
Cheng looked away.
I've never done
I
this
don't want to
before.
hurt
I
you.
noticed.
That's
I wasn't
obvious.
sure what to say
Wu
after
Suowei
that.
said
Suowei
firm.
didn't mean it to
Why?
hurt. But you might,
But it
because
landed
you
with
said
building
something
something
real.
real.
Expecting me to
Wu
fill in the
Suowei's
blanks. Then
voice
again,
wasn't harsh.
maybe that was
what
what
it
it
wasn't
needed.
soft either.
A push.
Something stubborn.
He didn't
Wu
look away.
Suowei wasn't
Cheng
teaching
nodded
what
slowly.
needed to be said.
I don't say things like that.
Suowei
So much
softened,
time
not
just
to
to
anyone.
to be in control.
I don't need
know.
perfection.
Wu Suowei
Wu
cheating.
Suowei replied.
I don't even need
full
honesty
honesty
or
or
having
having
to create a space.
I just need you to
corner.
stop
Not
disappearing.
rejection.
There was no
Every time you
immediate
feel
reply.
something.
But I didn't ask
Just
you to
did
say
not
it
respond
slowly.
right
You
away.
chose
As if
to.
letting the
But then
words
he
sink
reached
into
into his
place
left pocket,
he barely
truth of it.
allowed
Pulled
to be
out a
touched.
small,
And then you disappeared.
folded piece of
He
paper
said
quietly.
quietly.
He offered it
that
to
one
Wu
word
Suowei
without
without
a
a
word,
word,
unembellished.
like it
Wu
was
Suowei
felt
took
like
it
a door
cautiously
opening
that
and
landed
Wu
harder
Suowei
than it
stood
should
inside
have.
were a
And
few
moved.
lines
Cheng opened his
written in
mouth, setting his
speak,
empty cup
deliberate
and
handwriting.
closed it. I'm going to get
Sometimes
ready.
I
He said.
think I'm only
I
good
was
at
scared
things
that require no heart.
Wu
Maybe
Suowei's
that's why
brow
this
feels
feels
like
like
learning
more
how to
in
breathe
Wu
underwater
Suowei
than
didn't
disbelief.
answer right
Wu
away.
Suowei read it
He
twice,
turned back,
then
then
looked
meeting
up.
Chi
You
Cheng.
seen
You wrote something
this.
in me that I tried to
If I didn't
hide.
Chi Cheng not,
I would have never
Wu
opened the
Suowei
door.
folded the
Of
paper
losing
and
control,
shoulders
slid it into his
relaxed.
pocket.
For a long
Just
moment,
slightly.
maybe we
Wu
started
Suowei
for the
didn't
first time in
respond.
days.
For the first
The sound
time,
of
that
the
deep
resting
hadn't
hadn't
realized
broken
Chi
silence
Cheng's
holding
stance was
and the
free.
evening
A
breeze
breath
Wu
passed
Suowei
between them,
disappeared into the
rustling the
hallway
hem of his hoodie,
leaving him alone
Then
in
the
the
city
living room.
continued to move
Unexpected
alone.
gentleness.
Feel like
Wu Suowei
untouched
said.
by their moment.
It felt like
but
a
in
small,
that
small
balcony
space.
space.
The kind of
Something
invitation
fragile
you only
and
give
vital.
to someone you
Stared
started
at
to
him,
trust.
not
Not
love
love
and caring
not
yet.
yet.
For once,
But
stayed
Wu Suowei
understanding.
offered a faint
And that,
smile.
for now, was
Tired,
enough.
but sincere. Don't run from me. If you're going to show up, then show up. It wasn't an invitation. It was a challenge. Chi Cheng took a breath, deep and grounding. Then he nodded just once. The silence between them didn't break. It shifted into something quieter, more patient. Less like an ending and more like the beginning of a fragile, necessary truce. The
Wu
late
Suowei
wasn't
hadn't
expected him to show up.
His
again.
life had been
Soaking
built around
certainly
precision.
not
He knew
early
better
the
than
next
to
morning.
chase a man
Standing outside
how
his
to run
set,
with
feelings got close
and
and
nervous
nervous
energy
energy
that
that
Suowei
watching the sun dim low patterns more deliberate. No reliable
radio
door
played a
and
slow ballad
and
and
every
zero
moment
boundary
was
and
unpredictable.
breaking
His
away
fingers
from
tapped against his
invitation
thought
finally
did return,
and it was driving
Before
something
evening,
dangerously
Wu
close.
Suowei
They
had
had
fallen
already
into
curled
rhythm
up
handed
house
him
without
he
warning,
wasn't supposed
without
to
a word.
touch dinner.
His
His
eyes,
mouth parked outside.
morning
Wu
sharp
Suowei's
door
door
opened
opened
without
without ceremony.
conversation.
Wu Suowei's
Ridiculous
changed
stepped
steps
like
afraid,
afraid,
hoping to
hoping
catch
to
a
catch
glimpse
a
of his
glimpse
never
of his
They didn't
never
speak,
seen,
but
but
as
still
Chi
was
Cheng
Wu
felt
Suowei
himself
was
lingering
lingering
more
more
on. He didn't speak at
apartment
first,
waiting
smelled
for
faint
somebody
removing
to
the rest
come
of bread,
over.
set down his
Conversation
keys,
but
shouldn't
Wu
start
Suowei
never
never
made
between
it
them.
happen.
Of a man
Green
no
eyed
longer
Jack
asked
heavy
for
with a
life.
voice.
Never
Sky
practiced
wasn't
in
cherry,
grace,
still
never
nothing
offered
else
more than
rain.
Chi
Wu
Cheng.
Suowei
They
just
both
taken
taken
shelter.
still
Still, he
brittle,
didn't go down the
but
everything
yet
outside and
Wu
Wu
Suowei
Suowei
curled
curled
his
shoulders
shoulders
around
around
him,
waiting,
and
and
laughed.
I
wasn't avoiding
out
him.
on
Neither of them
Chi Cheng
dared
said
to
out
say out
loud.
stood by the window
Chi
for a
Cheng
moment
had been
before
tired.
sitting across
The
from him.
habit
Wu
of deep
Suowei
eyes
too upright
not
enough
someone
training or the
but
never
never
quite
crossing the
He looked like
line.
a man
No,
ready
Wu
to
Suowei
make
didn't
everything
understand.
already regretted.
So when
Wu
all the
Suowei
hard
didn't
had
joke
to come
near
near
you
you
without
without
Suowei
knowing
said
the great
Finally,
finally
Suowei's
one
expression
evening,
remained
I
something
know,
in
dust,
crack.
but the
Chi
heat
Cheng
was
replied,
finding,
and
and
she
she
rubbed a hand over the back of his neck.
They sat on the balcony,
and
Chi
walked
Cheng
farther
pretended
into the
didn't
room.
happen.
He'd meant to brush it off,
Wu
and
Suowei
Suowei
studied
I think it's
he was
because
joking
the
the
part where you said
everything
Suowei
I
tried
tried
to
to
hide,
voices
shifted,
spilling out of
I
her
really
belly,
had
ran the moment,
laughter
Chi
echoed
Cheng
you
couldn't
bring
bring
somewhere
somewhere
on.
on.
Suowei gave a short
Now,
nod, she regretted against the railing.
not
He didn't
because
retaliate.
Suowei
Act like I'm trying to destroy
he
you.
exhaled,
But
no,
no,
something
Suowei
in the air
teaching
behind
said
him on
it
the
wasn't
low
an
apology,
apology,
not
Chi Cheng
exactly
was
the
sure,
but
but
casual
Suowei
phase
did
think
that
you're trying to
matter.
teach me
Wu
how
Suowei
not to
had
talk
always
about
been
that.
difficult.
Everything
Think
about
Suowei
way
looked
playing
up and
things
sat
were
like
different.
sharp
Every
eyes
inch of
and
him
she
reading
didn't
in
indeed
detail.
self-assured.
That's
Voice
so
that was
terrifying.
more sarcasm.
Wu Suowei
Chi
didn't
Cheng
know
answer
he knew.
immediately.
And
Different
clearly
instead,
but
he didn't
grow
grow
up
on the floor,
sometimes,
but he
he didn't have
to
back
be
leaning
so
against
always
her,
carried
that
like
alone
stretched
made
out.
Chi-Ching
A
nervous.
small
He looked
smirk
exhausted.
played
Vulnerability
out.
says
Never
vulnerability
welcome
says the
with
man who
him.
measures
His
himself
emotions
against
like
silence.
things
I didn't
after
think
that
you
night.
cared. I'm not
what I
good at
thought,
this.
he
Chi-Ching
murmured.
chuckled.
He dodged
Wu
calls,
Suowei let the
ignored
I think I
anger
did.
for a
Wu
moment,
Suowei
skipped
their
a
usual
minute
Thursdays.
forward.
I
What I
do.
do.
This
He
there
hated
is
himself
instinct
for
by
wanting
that
to
bare
push hard.
honesty that
He
letting
couldn't
them
stop.
see the
Maybe
parts
just
of
then,
him
the
delivering
apartment
doors
door
little
slowly
impractical.
opened,
Wu
and
Suowei
Wu
stepped
Suowei
down.
Wu
Suowei wasn't
Suowei
sure what scared him
other
more.
tucked
I never
emotions
asked you
don't
to
pay
pay
rent
or
or
knowing that it
Chi-Ching
stirs
glanced
only
along
asked
his
you to
shoulder.
wear.
Do you
I
still
know.
tired?
So
Not
what
now.
glance around.
Wu
That
Suowei
scares
look
me.
for
tone.
Too many
Don't
fingers
demand
broken.
certainly
Say
over the
not
years.
real.
You just
Metaphors,
disappear
irrational
days.
part of
Sometimes
and
never
never
knowing
knowing
what to do
with
waiting
that
around
silence
silence
disrupting again.
No,
Wu Suowei
not
leaning
cool.
forward now.
He missed
Firm
him.
this time.
Resting
Not
his
just
arms
the banter
against
or
his
the
voices.
routine.
Leaning
It's
back
not
against
against
the
the
railing
discomfort.
now.
I don't want to
Run
run
and
always
arms
resting
and
behind
it's
him.
the word
Coming.
settled
I
for
used to
demand
want to be a
lose
firefighter
keep
and
vanishing.
raw. Every
Wu
time we
Suowei's
get
thoughts
curved
curved
into
anyway.
something
Really
dry.
he rolled down the window
quite a
at
smile.
Cheng
Cheng
said,
dealing
"That's
ridiculous.
I'm trying
But
to be
I'm
thrown
not
away
aware
now.
now.
Not
She's
sure if
thought
that's
it'd
enough
be
yet
good
here
to
to
say
walk
I'm
pretending
trying.
nothing happened.
And now
Silence that followed.
I'm not
asking
asking
you
to.
to.
One eyebrow
Not from
from
anger,
but
he
for a
Cheng
ride
just
or
standing
standing
at the
at the
now I
door
just
before
try
he
not to
figured
walk
out
through
how
his
to walk
phone
through
too
it.
soon.
Wu
Oblivious
Suowei
Suowei
stared
stared
at
at
thoughts
Wu
unraveling
Suowei
and
reached
coming
out
through the window, lit
gently
one
said,
side of the
dangerous.
back door.
Cheng's
His
head.
footsteps
Cheng
were
hesitated,
slid
slid through the short
outlining
strands
the
of
not
hair.
physically.
Then
For the
soldier
first
walking
time,
into
the touch
stillness.
wasn't intimate.
Wu
Wu
Suowei
saw
saw
not
he
just
heard
the
the
man
man was
trying to
grounded
fight,
and their eyes
silent
walked
declaration
over
to survive.
his face
But
seemed
sunrise
wrinkled,
flickered
learning
still
how to be
here.
known.
Then
He didn't
I don't want
close
your
his eyes
readable
for a
didn't
brief
read.
moment.
Suowei stopped
letting
himself
himself
lean into the
solid,
second
going anywhere.
Neither of them
felt
said
like
something
grounding.
else.
I'm not
I've
perfect.
been
I need to
avoiding
stop
you.
guarding
Wu
every
Suowei
word.
said,
Voice
said I haven't been
voice
watching.
I've got sharp corners.
Wu Suowei
but
tilted his head
Cheng looked away.
I want to figure out.
I don't want to
I
hurt
noticed.
you.
That's
I'm
all.
not sure what to say.
Wu Suowei
didn't mean
turning
it to
slightly,
you might,
but
as
ended
he
with
said,
building
something
something
real.
If I
Fall back
felt
to
the
Suowei's
voice
then again.
wasn't
Then
harsh.
maybe that was
It
what it
wasn't
wasn't
soft
Wu
either.
Suowei
Something
said.
stubborn
He didn't
and
look Suowei
we
wasn't
figured out
teaching
to
nodded
soften
together.
certainty.
I don't ask
things
Wu
like
Suowei
that.
to
So much
start
time
not
to
to
settle
here
here
in
in
control.
control.
I don't need
know.
perfection.
There it
Suowei
was.
Suowei replied. I don't even need
not
stop
nodding
nodding
to
or
him
having
enough
to
to
be
create
I just
clarity.
need you to
Corner.
stop
Not
not
reject.
There was an
Every
outburst
time
of
you
conditional patience.
But I didn't ask
you
you
was
to
offering
respond
right away.
As if letting
and
the
then
word
he reached into his back pocket.
rarely
Cheng
allowed
nodded
to
and then you then reached
Okay.
his jacket.
Wu Suowei
He offered it
that
to
one word.
He placed it gently on the
Like
table
Wu
and
Suowei
felt
like
like
a
a
door
door.
What's that?
And
Wu
Suowei
Suowei
inside were a few
teaching
opened
his mouth, setting his empty
deliberate
hand.
I'm not asking
I
you
think
for
I'm
it.
only
I'm
good
asking
at
you to
saying
know it's yours if you need it.
Suowei's
Maybe
brow
that's
wide
Suowei
distinct,
do you want me
learning
to?
more
He
curiosity
didn't Suowei
to
didn't
answer
answer
right
right
away.
away. Suowei ready
What?
to
Turned back
and
then
said,
meeting
Cheng
you
started
wrote this.
in me that I try to
Chi
hide.
Cheng
I
would have never
Wu
opened
Suowei
it.
folded the
Of
paper
losing
and
control
slowly
into
relaxed
his pocket.
for a long
Just
moment.
like maybe we
just
started
a subtle
the
first time in days.
Someone
The
who
first time
found
that
that
something
hadn't
hadn't
realized
Cheng's
Cheng's
stance
and
the
the
air
air
between
between
them
them
shifted
Suowei
disappeared
less
into
like
the
the
hollow of his
spoken,
hoodie,
leaving
more
him
like
alone.
then.
The city continued
and
to
this
move
time
on.
neither of them were
Untouched
untouched by their moment.
It felt like
but in
small
that small
invitation.
balcony space,
The kind of
something
invitation
fragile
you
only
invite
give to
someone
someone
you
you stared
started
at
him.
trust,
Unsure
not
how
learn
to carry
Cheng
that
for once,
but
stayed
understanding.
understanding,
Offered a faint
and that
smile.
for now was
Tired,
enough, but sincere. Don't run from me.
If you're going to show up, then show up.
It wasn't an invitation. It was a challenge. Cheng took a breath, deep and grounding. Then he nodded just once. The silence between them didn't break. It shifted into something quieter, more patient. Less like an ending and more like the beginning of a fragile, necessary truce.